It is a constant in human history that humans try to explain the natural occurrences around them, and it is very often that they try to do this through religion. The people in Briskillanya are no exception, and most of the planet's approximately 975 million people are adherents to one faith and or another. I will discuss the various major religions of the planet in that same weird geographical order I use for the other things. To begin, the dominant religion in most of Hientia is Ritanism, a monotheistic religion originating from modern-day northeastern Yanton. Ritanism is quite ancient, but never really had a single established holy text or leader. Historically, all that makes Ritanis is their belief in Ritan, an omnipotent god with little other defining traits who is said to have created the world and continues to influence it. As you can imagine, a religion with so few uniting beliefs historically had many splinter groups, but now these many groups have coalesced into two, one for each of the two countries in Hientia. In Haldar, Ritanism is very important in daily life and has a significant voice in the government, and in Yanton, however, Ritanism is even more centralized, and the government directly controls the church, nearly the opposite of the relationship in Haldar. Inyantonian Ritanism functions mainly on the assertion that the Inyantonian leadership is chosen by Ritan himself. Both sects have their own, completely different holy books created by the local leaderships. Outside of the two main sects, many Hientian peoples living outside of Haldar and Yanton, mostly in Verokach, practice their own variants of Ritanism. The Ritanian symbol is a stylized depiction of the Hientian continent. Sonili is a polytheistic religion practiced in southern Hientia and Halara. Sonils, as the followers of the religion are called, worship a small pantheon of nature-based gods that are only said to intervene in human lives in times of great tribulation or when specifically called upon. The religion is also known for its strong pacifistic beliefs, calling for violence only when strictly necessary, leading to vegetarianism to be common among its followers. Sonili is incredibly old, having its earliest recognizable roots appear as 10,000-year-old cave paintings depicting some early forms of a few Sonil deities. When the Proto-Sonils sailed across the Anion Sea in Hientia, being the second major group to do so after the group that will become the Haldaris and Antonians and Yenisei, they brought their own religion with them. About 7,000 years later, when they settled down, they became the Zhigyans and Trajans, two groups that would later be conquered by Imperial Yanton. In the far south, Hienia was eventually formed. Of course, the vast distances separating the three caused them to grow more and more different over the millennia. The two northern countries' languages completely lost mutual intelligibility, and the versions of Sonili became nearly unrecognizable. Meanwhile, modern Sonili was created in Hienia, and various religious texts were compiled into the Niel, the Sonil Holy Book. Also during this time, the original Hienian language fell out of use and was replaced with a modern Verokachian-like one. Then, Hienians sent northward expeditions to explore Hientia, where they accidentally recontacted their distant relatives. After noticing the relations, the three made a concerted effort to restore their ancient religion, which was successful. Similarly, many of the small tribes in the far south of Hientia became Sonil. Unfortunately, when the Inyantonian regime rose, they forced the conquered Sonils either to renounce religion completely or become Ritanians. However, small pockets of underground Sonils exist to this day. When this happened in Hienia, Sonili continued to be practiced within Veroka, where at the present day it is becoming popular with the young Verokachian counterculture movement. The Sonili symbol is shown here. The three corners of the triangle represents the Hienians, Zhigyans, and Trajans. The little vertical line represents the various South Hientian tribes, and the horizontal one means unity. Next is the religion with the single most adherents, Drofkeism. Practiced in most of Veroka, Echen, Wemvar, and Isatanab, it is a comparably novel monotheistic religion worshipping the god Ez, a benevolent, omnipotent god who they believe actively interacts with humans. Drofkeism has a strong canon, a book called the Droez. Drofkeism was created around 1,400 years ago, and basically the only part of West Africa where it is in practice, Ayanias, by a prophet named Dro. Since the Yanisans were already perfectly happy with their current beliefs, Drofkeism instead expanded by land into the region of Etochapervanach, modern-day Echem, then a disorganized collection of various little countries, and by sea in the North Halara and Strohapervanach, places that found the idea of a powerful, friendly god palatable compared to their old beliefs that often praised gods explicitly described as being malevolent. Later, early Verokachian missionaries brought to modern-day Wembar, then mostly city-states, where it was successful with nearly everyone but the Ithicans and Pentalistans. Later still, when Verokach colonized Derek, Drofkeism spread into the rest of the Ristilian Islands, which Verokachian missionaries capitalized on, causing Isotia, Shaliska, and Lysosa to convert nearly entirely. Drofke fundamentalism is a common thing. For example, slightly before the Second Achenian Civil War, a bunch of Drofke fundamentalists formed the Theocratic faction. which has historically been one of the most important factions in Aachen, and it continues to be a major one today. During the war, two new Drofke factions broke off the theocrats. The matriarchy, which uses a few lines in the Droas that refer to as being female to justify being really sexist against men, and the patriarchy, which uses a few lines in the Droas that refer to as being male to justify being really sexist against women. In addition, it was utilized by Asotia when informed by Satanab, as non-Drofkes were forced to convert. The Drofke symbol is an 8-pointed star, representing the 8 original followers of Dro. The next religion, which goes by the elegantly monosyllabic name of Lan, is mostly localized to Aionius. Lan is a very ancient, old as Aionius itself, polytheistic religion. It relies very strongly on astrology, and the most important gods in the Lan pantheon are the ones of the planets. In fact, the names of the naked eye planets that most people in Briskillanya agree on are based on the names of their respective gods from Aeonian legend, and a few other countries use Aeonius' months named after planets. I'll correct the last episode now and say that only some places use these names. Most countries simply use months named after their local words for numbers. Lan has gone nearly unaffected for approximately 5,000 years, aside from creating a new major god for Jimpro was discovered around 90 years ago, and the religion constantly growing less and less strict and literalistic as it moves into modern times. Lan does have a holy book called the F. Lan's symbol is shown here. The line represents the Aini River and Lake, and the circle represents Mirablisk, the Lanan supreme god. I have previously discussed Ithicanism, the very old belief system of the 4 Ithic tribes in Wembar. Ithicanism is a polytheistic religion with a very large pantheon that is practiced in the Wembari middle constituent of Ithaca, the only Wembari constituent besides South Pensilista to not be majority Drofke. Unlike most of the other polytheistic churches, its pantheon has no clear hierarchy. Ithicanism is known for having unique gods for basically everything, though most of these are minor. Some Wembari Drofkes also believe in and sometimes worship Ithican gods. Ithicanism was created in modern-day Ithaca around the same time Lan was invented, which led to the formation of the original Ithican kingdom 3,000 years ago. During this time, the Teich, a book of Ithican rituals, history, and stories of the gods, was compiled. However, the kingdom fell apart when it was around 400 years in age, giving way to the 4 tribes of Hedi, Dobi, Greti, and Ven due to regional differences in governance and worship. Over the next century, they occasionally fought each other for basically no reason, until it was decided that there was no benefit for any of the fighting, so the Ithicans decided to pursue further cooperation. The Ithican Alliance was created, a combination of a mutual defense pact and a remarkably democratic shared government. At this time, the Athas were written, a collection of books that acted as a sequel to the Teich. In addition, Ithicanism was separated from the governments, making the tribes legally secular nations. The Ithican Alliance caused a long and mostly stable period of prosperity in the 4 little countries. There were some hiccups, like Vahria's terribly failed invasion of Ithaca, and then Kite's slightly less terribly failed invasion of Ithaca assisted by some Vahrian nationalists. The symbol of Ithicanism is the flag of the original Ithican kingdom, which is also used for the Alliance and the subsequent middle constituent. The black represents the shade created by the forests that cover much of Ithaca, orange is simply a color that has always been strongly associated with Ithicanism, and the white is there to make the colors clash less. The fact that the flag is a saltire represents the 4 tribes, which were already distinct sects by the time of the kingdom. By the way, the region got its name from the religion, not the other way around. Afonism is a polytheistic religion practiced mainly in Azertech, Trebina, Raveta, and South Pensilista. Calling Afonism polytheistic might be a bit of an exaggeration, since Afonis believe in 2 gods and worship only one. To clarify, Afonism recognized the existence of the benevolent creator god of Afe and the evil destroyer one of Tohav. Only Afe is worshipped in mainstream Afonism. Afonism is a relatively new religion, only truly being invented in modern-day Eastern Trebina, which was northeastern Trebina back then, about 500 years ago. It was adapted from much older beliefs from the same region, which were modified and compiled into a book called the Afon. Because the entire concept of beliefs in the supernatural never really caught on a large scale, the Trebinian countries had the lowest percentage of their populations to be religious. The symbol of Afonism is a stylized drawing of a table. Bwasism is an atheistic religion that exists mostly in Vinkel, Labau, and Fiora. Unlike the other major belief systems, it lacks any gods. The only supernatural thing it believes in is an afterlife that can be gone into with good behavior, and some sects believe in some spirits that help guide people there as well. Bwasism is about 2,000 years old and grew as Labau did. Bwasism has no holy text. Because Bwasism doesn't hold beliefs in any gods, It is common for many people of other faiths in Laval, especially those in the mostly Ritanism and Antonian immigrant community, to also identify as Bwasism. The symbol of Bwasism is an arrow with a circle on one end. The circle represents worldly things, the point of the arrow represents the afterlife, and the line connecting the two represents how the two things are intrinsically connected. The final faith I will cite is factually a family of smaller faiths, the Far family. Farrism is a loose collection of monotheistic and monolatristic sects, along with a few poly and atheistic ones, practiced in both Sonili and Anpai. Most of the Far religions worship Kolmoth, a kind god that is described as only being powerful due to being worshipped. In Sonili, most Farns consider the religious leader to be the current Sonili primary monarch, creating the strange scenario of the leader of some religions not being a member of them. The status of Farrism in Anpai is even more complicated. Over the course of the past centuries, some Anpaian dictators have made one sect or another of Farrism mandatory for the whole population. Some have made religion in general completely illegal. A few did both in the course of their reigns. The most notable sects are Heti, Chaleb, Ekel, Resh, Telisis, Teleun, Rahalite, Sichian, and General Anpayan. Farrism had its earliest forms in modern-day Rahelia, and then it expanded across the continent, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently. The Far, named after the family, is a symbol agreed on by most of the Far faiths, and it doesn't really mean anything, people just thought it looked nice. That's it. I am very sorry about how long this episode took to come out. Thank you for watching it anyway. As usual, feedback is very welcome. The next episode will be a detailed exploration of the Mirabos system, if that sounds interesting. Goodbye!